Red light is burning. This is the ultimate lesson in predatory economics. While the soft men are crying about the collapse of public services, the failing infrastructure, and the decay of the cities, the architect is sharpening his blade. The decline of the legacy world is not a tragedy, it is a feed. We are entering the era of resource cannibalism, the systematic extraction of value from the rotting carcass of a civilization that was too weak to sustain its own complexity. Let's dismantle the illusion of collapse. The soft man views the crumbling of the legacy grid as an end state. He sees the broken roads, the failing power plants, and the bankruptcy of the municipal systems as a sign that the world is stopping. The architect realizes that energy and capital never vanish. They only change states. When a centralized system begins to rot, it releases a massive amount of trapped value. Resource cannibalism is the art of positioning yourself to catch that value as it spills out. It is the realization that a dying city is a goldmine of scrap, real estate anomalies, and stranded assets that can be acquired for pennies on the dollar by those with the stomach to harvest them. We are witnessing the stranded asset phenomenon. Think about the massive office towers that are now empty because of the shift to synthetic labor. Think about the suburban malls that are ghost towns. The soft man looks at these and sees ruins. The architect looks at them and sees material reservoirs. These buildings contain thousands of tons of copper, high-grade steel, glass, and specialized hardware. In a world where the white market supply chain is broken by geopolitical conflict and inflation, the rotting infrastructure becomes the primary source of raw materials. Cannibalizing the old world to build a new one is not just a strategy, it is a metabolic necessity. You don't wait for the factory to ship you the parts. You harvest the parts from the factory that went bankrupt last Tuesday. Furthermore, we must address institutional liquidation. When a legacy institution, a bank, a school, or a government agency begins to fail, it enters a phase of desperation. They start selling off their most valuable non-core assets to cover their core liabilities. This is the cannibal's feast. The architect identifies these distress sales before they hit the open market. He buys the private data centers, the fleet of specialized vehicles, and the information-dense archives that the failing institution can no longer afford to maintain. You aren't investing in the sense of the old stock market. You are performing an autopsy and keeping the organs that still function. You are acquiring the screws and bolts of the old empire to build your own private perimeter. Resource cannibalism also applies to human capital. As the social contract dissolves, millions of highly skilled technicians, engineers, and specialists are being off-boarded by the failing system. These people are displaced assets. The architect doesn't hire them as employees in the traditional sense. He recovers them. He offers them a place in his private network, a gray zone sanctuary where their skills are valued in hard assets rather than degrading fiat. You are cannibalizing the talent pool of the state to staff your own parallel infrastructure. While the state is busy arguing over labor rights and union contracts, the architect is building a shadow guild of elite operators who have nowhere else to go. You are the employer of last resort for the people who actually know how the world works. The most brutal form of this strategy is infrastructure arbitrage. In many regions, the government can no longer afford to maintain the last mile of the grid, the water pipes, the power lines, or the security of specific neighborhoods. The architect doesn't wait for the repair crew that is never coming. He performs a tactical takeover. He installs his own off-grid energy systems, his own water filtration nodes, and his own private security checkpoints. He effectively cannibalizes the space that the state has abandoned. He becomes the de facto lord of a microgeography. To the outside world, it looks like a no-go zone of decay, but inside the perimeter, it is a sovereign node powered by the scavenged tech of the old world. You are literally eating the state's territory from the inside out. The soft man is terrified of resource cannibalism because it requires him to admit that the old rules are dead. He still believes in insurance claims and government bailouts. He is waiting for a return to normal, but normal was a high-maintenance hallucination that required cheap energy and infinite debt. That era is over. We are now in the metabolic realignment. The wealth of the next century will not be created in the sense of a rising tide lifting all boats. It will be transferred from the bloated, dying organisms to the lean, aggressive ones. You must stop viewing yourself as a participant in the economy and start viewing yourself as a scavenger of empire. This requires a predatory audit of your surroundings. Look at your city. Where is the structural decay most advanced? That is where the friction is highest and the prices are lowest. Look for the unclaimed value, the abandoned warehouses with high-voltage power lines, the gray market logistics hubs, the forgotten patents of bankrupt startups. These are the calories of your expansion. expansion. The architect knows that alpha is found in the gaps between the system's failure and the public's realization of that failure. You are the one who moves in during the gaps. You are the one who harvests the organs while the body is still warm. Resource cannibalism is not about destruction, it is about efficiency. The old system was inefficient, wasteful, and top-heavy. Its collapse is a release of potential energy. By cannibalizing its parts, you are actually recycling the best of human achievement into a form that can survive the dark era. You are the Noah of the digital age, but instead of a wooden ark, you are building a fortress of scavenged high-tech. You are taking the gold from the idols to fund the wall of the sanctuary. Part 1 is the shift in focus. Stop looking for growth and start looking for decay. Decay is where the liquidity is hidden. Decay is where the negotiation leverage is absolute. In the age of the totalitarian final boss, the state will try to lock down all new production, but it is much harder for them to track the cannibalization of their own rotting remains. If you own the scrap, you own the future. The feast has begun. The only question is, are you at the table or are you on it? The state's biggest weakness is its reliance on scale. It is built to monitor massive centralized flows of value, the bank transfers, the container ships, the major highways, but as the system rots, it loses its granular sight. The architect exploits this by moving into the logistics of the void. If you have successfully cannibalized an asset, whether it's a ton of copper, a crate of high-end GPS, or a displaced technician, your next problem is frictionless relocation. You cannot use the white market logistics. You cannot call a standard shipping company and hope the AI customs or the social credit road sensors don't flag your cargo. You must move your resources through the shadow veins of the dying grid. This starts with physical data masking. In a world of total surveillance, a moving truck is a data point. The architect utilizes logistical camouflage. He doesn't move his scavenged take in high-security armored vans. He moves it in the clothing of decay. He uses fake trash trucks, rusted-out delivery vans, or ghost ambulances. To the state's AI eye, you are just another piece of statistical noise moving through the rubble. You are hiding in plain sight by mimicking the very poverty and decay that the soft men are so afraid of. The void is not empty. It is a crowded, messy space where the state's sensors are overwhelmed by low-value data. By looking low-value, you achieve high-velocity stealth. Furthermore, we must address jurisdictional ghost running. Every border, even the internal ones between city districts or provinces, is a checkpoint of extraction. The state wants to tax your cannibalized resource or confiscate it as strategic surplus. The architect maps the zero-grip zones. These are the areas where the police have stopped patrolling because the cost of control exceeds the value of tax. These are the gray veins. By moving your assets through these lawless corridors, you bypass the sovereign toll booths. You are trading safety for sovereignty. You build your own relay stations in abandoned warehouses or off-grid farmsteads. You move your resources in short sprints rather than long hauls, staying below the algorithmic detection threshold. The soft man is paralyzed because he can't find a verified path. He wants a GPS that tells him the safe route, but there are no more safe routes. There are only calculated risks. The architect uses human intelligence, HUMINT, the local network of scavengers, gray zone mechanics, and disgruntled grid workers to find the gaps. You pay in hard assets, silver, fuel, or clean food to buy information on the blind spots. While the state is monitoring the fiber optic cables, you are moving your value through the back alley tunnels. You are building a parallel logistics stack that doesn't rely on permission or digital verification. One of the most critical resources in the void is mobile energy. You cannot cannibalize a data center or a specialized factory if you can't power your tools or your transport. The architect views fuel and kilowatts as logistical blood. He doesn't rely on the flickering grid. He scavenges industrial-scale batteries from the electric graveyards of the soft men and builds portable power nodes. He uses siphoned energy from the state's own leaking infrastructure, tapping into the vampire lines that the grid controllers have lost track of. If you have the power, you have the freedom to disassemble anything, anywhere, at any time. You are the acid that dissolves the old world and carries it away in your vessels of shadow. The logistics of the void also requires inventory decoupling. You never store all your cannibalized assets in one main warehouse. That is a single point of failure. The architect practices fragmented storage. He breaks his harvest into 100 small pieces and hides them in disguised nodes across the city. A self-storage unit here, a buried container there, a trusted basement in a gray neighborhood. To the state, you own nothing. To the shadow ledger, you are the king of the scavenge. If one node is burnt by a raid or a collapse, you only lose 1% of your power. You are indestructible because you are distributed. You have applied the blockchain logic to the physical world. The architect also masters the art of the bribe. In a dying system, compliance officers are the most cannibalizable resource of all. Their salaries are being eaten by inflation, and their social status is a joke. They are starving wolves in state uniforms. The architect doesn't fight the checkpoints. He feeds them. He knows exactly what every grid guardian wants. Is it a hard currency voucher? Is it antibiotics? Is it unmonitored fuel? By lubricating the gears of the state with scavenge value, you turn the enemies into enablers. You move your contraband through the front gate because the man holding the key is now on your shadow payroll. This is infiltration logistics. You are using the state's own greed to bypass its control. Part 2 is the operational shift. Stop trying to protect your assets within the system and start moving them through the gaps. The grid is a filter designed to catch the large and stationary. The architect stays small and kinetic. He moves through the void like a virus, invisible, adaptable, and impossible to contain. He knows that in the metabolic realignment, the carrier is just as important as the cargo. If you can move value where the state says nothing exists, you have already won. The soft men are waiting for the supply chain to recover. The architect is the supply chain now. The state's database says you are a nobody. The tax algorithm says you are a low-value resident. The soft men look at you and see a scavenger picking through the bones of a dead neighborhood. This is your greatest strategic advantage. In the final stage of the protocol, we execute the cannibal's ledger. This is the process of converting scrap, shadows, and stranded assets into real, unshakable power. You aren't just hoarding stuff. You are performing a metabolic alchemy, turning the waste of a dying civilization into the foundations of a sovereign empire. The first move is the asset-to-service pivot. You have cannibalized the hardware, the copper, and the data centers. Now you don't sell the scrap for degrading fiat currency. That would be a biomechanical error. Instead, you use those scavenged assets to provide infrastructure as a service, IaaS, to the gray zone. You become the private power provider for your local trade guild. You become the secure data host for the shadow merchants. You are no longer selling a commodity. You are selling sovereign continuity. In a world where the official grid is flickering, the man who can provide constant uptime is the de facto king. You are charging a privacy premium that the state can't compete with because the state is too busy monitoring its own collapse. You must implement the shadow cap table. The architect doesn't hold his cannibalized wealth in a single name or a single jurisdiction. He uses fractional ownership across his private tribe. You give the displaced technician, you salvaged a 5% stake in the energy node he maintains. You give the gray zone merchant a 2% stake in the logistics hub. By distributing the equity of decay, you create a mutual defense network. If the state comes for one of you, they are coming for the income stream of 20 people. This isn't communism, it is warlord capitalism. You are building a loyalty stack that is bound by metabolic interest rather than social contract. You are the general partner of a portfolio of survival. Furthermore, we must address the laundering of the physical. How do you turn gray assets into white power? You don't try to legalize the scrap. You use the scrap to build a front-end business that looks unremarkable to the lords of the grid. You open a repair shop, a recycling center, or a specialized construction firm. These businesses are the skin of your operation. They accept the digital ruble for standard services to keep the taxman happy, but the back end is powered by your cannibalized resources. You are using untaxed energy and sovereign hardware to run a compliant face. This is the double ledger protocol. You are feeding the beast just enough to stay off the radar, while your real margin is hidden in the black market productivity of your salvaged empire. The architect also masters the arbitrage of desperation. As the white market price of resources spikes due to green bans or supply chain failures, your cannibalized reserve becomes strategic liquidity. You are the only one with high-grade copper when the grid needs to expand. You are the only one with functional cooling systems when the data centers overheat. You don't sell your reserve for money. You sell it for hard favors and political immunity. You trade material reality for administrative protection. You become the man who can get things done for the local bureaucrats who are struggling to keep their districts from rioting. You are buying the enforcers with the very scrap the state threw away. One of the most powerful moves in the ledger is knowledge asset extraction. When you cannibalize a bankrupt firm, the most valuable thing isn't the furniture, it's the proprietary processes and operational knowledge. You harvest the brains of the engineers before they disperse into the welfare line. You document their black box methods, parallel production. You are building a private library of execution. While the soft men are losing their skills to AI dependence, you are preserving the human torque of the old world. You are becoming the repository of civilization in a dark age. In 2026, the person who knows how it works is the only person who owns the result. We must also talk about the exit from the scrap. The goal of resource cannibalism is not to stay a scavenger forever. It is to use the windfall of decay to bridge into permanent sovereignty. You use the profits from your grey infrastructure to buy hard geography, remote land with sovereign water rights, independent energy potential, and defensible terrain. You are moving your wealth from the volatile rubble of the city to the stable soil of the frontier. You are turning the dead past into the living future. You are the cannibal who became a founder. You use the rot to fertilize your own kingdom. The soft man is waiting for the economy to improve. He doesn't realize that the economy is just a set of relationships, and those relationships have shifted. The old world is a sinking ship, and the soft man is trying to rearrange the deck chairs to get a better view. The architect is in the engine room with a blowtorch, cutting out the high-grade components to build his own lifeboat. He knows that nature abhors a vacuum, and as the state retreats from reality, the cannibal advances. You are the successor species. You are the metabolic update that the system couldn't prevent. Part 3 is the strategic realignment. Stop asking, how do I survive the collapse? And start asking, how do I harvest the collapse? Every broken window is an opportunity. Every bankrupt institution is a sale. Every displaced person is a potential asset. You are the architect of the void, and the void is full of wealth for those who aren't afraid of the dark. The lords of the grid think they can control you with digital chains, but they can't control a man who is self-powered, self-armed, and self-sustained by the very debris they left behind. The feast is over. Now the reign begins. The ledger is closed. The perimeter is secure. The assets are migrated.